Hey,
Hey there.
hopefully that's a little bit better.
It's still pretty
Getting
blurry.
blasted by the sun.
I don't know why. We
Oh,
never had.
yeah,
Oh,
it says
now
we
it
have a
cleared
poor
up all of a
connection.
sudden. Comes and
Okay, good.
goes. All right. Hello, Eric. I love you. Kimberly, what's up?
Love you more.
Since the last time we talked, like 1 minute ago. And
Yep, 30 seconds ago.
yeah, we are going to talk about something a blog member in particular from Spain has really been interested in, and that's our justice system. Actually, the jail system. You want to talk about that, Eric? Shall we?
He's like, why not?
Okay, I'm going to read some of his questions. In theory, the world is a safer place because most criminals are put in jail. I am personally content that in some cases they simply lock them up and throw away the key. Nevertheless, I also believe that everyone deserves second and third and as many chances they can get to become a better citizen. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, the jail system does not help to put this into practice. Eric, what ideally should be done with these human beings that make wrong decisions instead of locking them up?
He's a smartass, and you guys know that. He's like,
Oh,
well, first of all, who said there's a wrong or a right?
that's true.
He's like, so you can X that out. Of course, we'll go through that real quick. He says, there is no wrong or right. As bad as it can be, it's not wrong. As holy and great as it can be, it's not right. It is what it is, and that's it. Everything is as it's supposed to be. So he goes, that thing you said about lock up the key and throw it away or whatever, lock them up and throw away the key. He says, when you say that you believe, and he's talking to that person that submitted the questions, he says, when you say that you believe that they should get like a second or a third chance, he says, but I ask you this without even looking at the situation, do you believe that everything that is happening is supposed to be happening that way? Like everything that's happening is meant to be that way. It can't, everything that unfolds, everything that manifests, every breath ever given, he says, is as it's supposed to be. It can never be, there's no such thing, and it can never possibly be outside of that. Everything that happens is a direct manifestation of energy. So, people that get in trouble and get locked up, he says, it is their mission. It is a part of their process. So this whole thing we call life, he says, is a process.
Yeah,
He says,
these are all
so
just
look at the bigger
experiences.
picture.
They're just experiences meant to push us forward. Those are your
Right.
own
He
words,
says,
Eric.
so look at the bigger, and look at, and just because there are criminals doesn't mean that they're bad people. It doesn't mean, because it's just a judgment. And he's like, you're not there to judge. You're there to be. And that's it. He says, so it's hard because we have these things called emotions, he says, and we generally choose to know ourselves and express ourselves through those things called emotions. But if we can stay clear of them, then we can see it for what it's supposed to be. We can see it for what it is, that everything that's happening and unfolding is happening as it should. There's no such thing as something happening that wasn't supposed to. If it wasn't supposed to, it wouldn't have manifested. It wouldn't be a possibility in like the realm of physics and quantum physics. It wouldn't, we look at ratios and what's the word I'm looking for? Not possibilities, but
probabilities.
Oh gosh, I can't hear.
Quantum probabilities.
Yes, thank you. Probability. Yeah. So he's like, we're looking at energy and how it unfolds and manifests. And if it wasn't, if it's basically like a probable cause, it's going to happen. If it has a lot of energy behind it or oomph behind it, he says, it's going to happen.
Well, let's get back
whether it came from a thought, from an action, from a past life pattern.
Okay, let's get to the root question, though. What do you do about them? So, like, what should have been done to the guy who got drunk and shot your girlfriend, Allie? in the back of the head, thinking it was unloaded, that the gun was still unloaded.
He says,
Tell Allie I said hi, by the way.
he says when people do, he's just tapping on his heart, like, I love you, thank you. So he says when people do like heinous, awful crimes and things like that, that we want to put all these judgments and labels on, it is seen for us. You know, we have these tools set in place that guide the way we operate and function, because we are so like absent-minded. And when he says absent-minded, he's talking about like we're not present with ourselves. We're not mindful.
Right.
So we have to have like these tools and these systems and rules and all that stuff in place to keep us somewhat moving forward. Otherwise, it's like we just fall asleep and stagnate and implode. Okay. He says. So, you know, even with the worst of the worst crimes you could possibly conjure up in your head, those people too, you know, we can't even say what should happen to those people, because it's none of our business. He says, in the grand scheme of things, it's none of our business what should happen to them. Of course, we want to say, well, that was my family member. Yeah, it's my business. But ultimately, remember, if you can go back into the God source in you, then you realize everybody is here for a purpose. There is purpose and value in everything. Usually, Mom, he says, the most awful, catastrophic situations directly show us God's strength and resilience through the way humans behave to each other, through the way they band together and help each other pull forward. It's like when someone loses a loved one, we have those calling hours, right? And then the place is flooded with people to come out and show love and support. Mm-hmm. So there is, for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. There's a balance. He doesn't really like the word balance, because it's there's a lot of illusions in that, but he's trying to show how for everything that happens, there is a reaction. There is good in everything.
Okay.
It's up to you.
I want to keep the answers kind of short, because he has a lot of questions. Okay. Erik, just get to the point. Just kidding. But so this guy should have been just let go and just do community service. She shouldn't have been locked up.
He says that's not what I'm saying. He says, again, we have those systems in place on this earth, in this realm, to keep us functioning in an order that we believe to be best for ourselves.
Okay.
So, you know, subject them to those rules, push them through those systems that are in place. But we have to remember, we're not the ones that make that judgment ultimately. So it's a fine line. It's a real subtle difference. Imagine. Basically.
What about people like sex offenders and serial killers, people who are really have no or criminals that have no intention of bettering themselves? What do you do about them?
You wanted a short answer. He said, pray for them.
But what do you do as far as the justice system as the jail system is concerned?
He's such a smart.
I know. I mean, in a lot of cases, these could be classified as psychiatric cases, this gentleman says, which is not done as often as it should. In some cases, these people can't help themselves. Sometimes they're even glad they are caught. Sometimes these individuals seem to have no cure. The system does not always handle these cases as they should.
He says most of the time, if you don't have the capacity to see yourself in something else, you either, you know, throw your hands up, walk away, let it fall silent. So basically, if we're looking at the case of like someone who really needs psychiatric help, but they kind of just get dismissed and like thrown back out on the streets, most of the time it's just a failure of the system, he says, because that person, the judge, is an emotional being. Yeah. And they might get emotional in the sense of like, this shit freaks me out, I don't know how to deal with it. You're fine, go and do this, you know, community service, introvert. So they don't, it's like they don't want to engage, they don't want to get involved because they're afraid.
Or they lock them up,
So,
but without trying to rehabilitate them.
right. And that's, again, a play on the emotions, he says, because they're emotional beings. So we can't even expect perfection from those people that are put in those high places, like a judge, because it's going, they cannot help but to have an emotion connected to it. So if someone comes in and they're like, they're pressing charges against someone that murdered their loved one, of course they're going to result to the emotions and get angry and frustrated and think, this isn't right. I'm going to throw the book at him. I'm going to give him the worst I could possibly do. Mm-hmm. So, and again, even if we're looking at a jury that is helping, they're all emotional beings. So that skews the picture, Mom. So that's why, he's saying, like, with people that need psychiatric help, he says, I can tell you right now, without a shadow of a doubt, there is nothing on this earth in place right now that is effective at capturing the essence of what these people are going through. He keeps calling it like a big scientific breakthrough. He's questioning his use of the word scientific, but he says they haven't got there yet. This is something that they've kind of like skirted around, but they're taking all the wrong approaches, he says.
Well, what should be done about drug offenses? Not drug smugglers or drug dealers, but people get caught with cocaine or marijuana or whatever. I think that's such a huge burden on the prison system and the justice system that they probably ought not to be jailed, but just undergo rehab. But what do you think?
He says it's relative. It just depends on the person and what they're going through. Yeah. Sometimes jail is better, so they don't have access to stuff.
Okay.
And then, like rehab, if the person is energetically in the place, rehab will work. If they're not, rehab fail them too. It won't work. But he says you have to look at the mechanisms of like control and addiction, he says. And that's where they need fulfillment. They're lacking something, so they like lash out in these ways. So that's where they need fulfillment.
All right, real briefly, what do you think about the private penitentiary system? It's become a big business in the U.S., and I think there's like 3.2 million people in American jails. Wow, that's a lot.
He said, you said the key word, Mom. It's a business.
So what do you think about them? Yeah.
Said that, wow, he's really passionate about this. He's angry. Like, he's expressing anger. He's like, it's garbage. There's nothing. It's a business, and there's so much that gets like swept under the rug. There's so much that stays under the blanket. He says the system, there's nothing in place. If someone goes to jail for something, there's nothing in place in these penitentiaries to rehabilitate these people. They come out worse off than before most of the time, he says, because there's no bridge for the psychiatric confinement. No psychiatric bridge for the confinement that they've been through.
Yeah.
So it's usually much worse. It creates introverts that become narcissistic and need control still. So he says it's like a collapse. He keeps showing them all collapsing. Yeah. They're all failing. They're all falling in. Maybe not financially, but they're all falling in the sense of being able to actually help and rehabilitate people.
They're guided by money, the bottom line, not by what is going to have the best results for society and for the inmate. Okay. Now, he said, I've seen news reports where some jails have great programs to improve the lives of inmates, like convicts taming horses, having inmates practicing meditation. Are there any other programs that you think would be successful, Erik, that would improve their lives and reduce the recidivism rate?
He says yes. I don't know if America's ready for a concept like this, but he's actually showing inmates. He's showing me an image of like people dressed in orange, so symbolically represents inmates, speaking to young adults, like in school systems.
Okay.
So not sure how school systems, this is why he's saying like America's really not ready for it, but because he goes, Mom, this goes back to what you wrote about in your books. If we had these inmates go and talk to these people about how to be like productive citizens, for one, it makes them think for themselves. It makes them internalize and see for themselves. But it's also rehabilitating the person too, because they're putting themselves, they're exposing basically all of their vulnerabilities, but they're doing it in a way that they know is positive. So it's kind of like dissolving the negative attachment they had to their past and the bad, decisions they made or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
So they share with these people. They become fulfilled by that sharing. And then, of course, it makes all of the kids listening internalize the process, like the thought process, and go, wow, I wouldn't want to do that for myself. I wouldn't want that kind of life for myself. So I should do this instead, So it really makes people be a little more mindful. It's both parties win, he says. He says, but could you imagine the day when they start letting inmates come and talk to school, like kids at the school systems? Like, he's literally showing them with chains around their ankles and around their wrists. And then, of course, when they get up and talk, they let the wrists fly, but the ankles are still chained.
Oh, my God. Going to the kindergarten class. Oh, boy, that'd be interesting. Well, one thing that I think is kind of sad is that when they get released from jail, they're still shackled because so many of them they get background checks, so it's hard for them to find a job. It's hard for them to even get an apartment, etc. And so some of them resort back to crime because they just can't make their way through life. Any suggestions?
Yeah, it's a stigma. He's just talking about like they become the label that put them in jail in the first place. They become that. So okay, he's going to suggest on both sides. He says, for the people, of the community receiving, like for me personally, my first cousin is a drug addict and he's recovering for 10 years now. And so we look at him and he's like, if you guys could just accept me for who I am now and who I want to be and stop holding my past against me, I would actually want to grow and change. But all you guys ever do, like his brother and stuff, remind him of, oh, you're just a drug addict. Oh. So he's like, well, why not prove him right? So he's telling us as a community, we have to be willing to accept who they are and where they are now, not what they did yesterday.
Right.
Not even what they did last week, he says. And then for that person that's trying to overcome that label, that stigma, he says, action speaks. Action is louder than words. So your character is going to speak for itself, he says. And you, when it comes to, again, this is just where the system fails us, he says, because we're stamped with that label. Yeah. That label is on our resume, and then people are afraid of labels. So he says, but your character speaks louder than any words ever will. Your energy speaks louder. So he says, be what you want to be in such a way that nobody will question anything else. Like if you want to be seen as productive and motivated, then be that, to the nth degree in such a way that they won't question, do you have a good work ethic? It's your character. This is where you're going to have to fall on. Your character speaks for itself, he says, not just saying it, speaking it, telling people. It's time to do.
Yeah, but sometimes they can't even get their foot in the door. The first thing that's done is a background check, and they won't even talk to the employee. I mean, frankly, the convict, the ex-con. If I had a choice between somebody who had a record and somebody who didn't, I'd choose the one without the record. That's the problem. Right. Maybe their record should be dissolved after a certain amount of time of good behavior. Expunged or something. What do you think?
It should. And he says, again, that's where the system fails us, because some of these people do come out a completely different human being for the better. And that's where he's even showing it's not an IQ test, but there's some sort of something in place where it kind of defines who you are. Okay. An IQ test defines, Yeah. But he's saying, after if there's no incidents, after 3 years or so, let it go. Like, why keep labeling them by their past?
I
So
know.
he's just encouraging, just saying, it'd be nice to see after 2 or 3 years of no incidents,
Right.
the court systems, then dissolve it, let it go. They've proven
Yeah.
um, that they can be productive.
Okay.
So
Here's a couple of more questions real quickly before we close. Um, is there ever going to be a day in modern society where current jails will be considered as human cruelty, just as we see now how mental asylums of the yesteryears were?
at first he said no, and he's kind of like going like this with his hand,
Mm-hmm.
um, because right now mankind is still in this stupid pattern, he says,
Yeah.
of believing that because they did bad, they deserve to be treated like that too.
Okay.
Like, oh, you did that, we should do the same to you. Well, then you're just perpetuating that energy, he
You're
says. Like,
fighting
what good
fire
does
with
that do?
fire. Yeah, fighting fire with
Yeah.
fire. Yeah, doesn't work.
So if you actually want to make a difference, love is the only thing that can make a difference. But humans don't have that capacity yet, like as a collective, to love a serial killer, to have compassion for them
That's a tough
because
one.
of the grace and love that they lack.
Yeah.
It's to go, oh man, what a terrible life that they live because they don't know what grace is. They don't know what love is.
Mm.
Can you imagine? So have compassion, not pity, but compassion and love, he says, for where they are in their consciousness. Um, because ultimately it's an aspect of you. It's an aspect we're
Yeah,
all.
that's true. So do you think that,
So
that instead of a jail, we ought to have almost these homes where these people can be mothered and loved and rehabilitated? Is that it? So they can
um,
learn how to love themselves?
no, he says that there needs to be more effective programs in the jail systems,
Hmm.
but he said that if we were to take, this is actually really disappointing. He says if we were to take like serial killers and all of that, and whatever, and put them in homes where the public can access them, or they can access the public, he said it would cause much more turmoil. Like, for example, um,
No, I'm not talking about.
some
I'm not talking about an actual home. I'm talking about an institution. But the institution works via the foundation of love and nurturing and all that kind of stuff. Like still a jail, but their whole concept is to teach
yeah,
people how to love themselves and how to receive
exactly,
love.
yeah, it's the same concept. So you're
Okay.
right. He said it's still like a lockdown place, but that's where those programs need to be in place, like um, meditation classes or yoga. I mean, anything
So
to
to
rehabilitate
stop
people.
concentrating on the punitive aspects of it and concentrate instead on the loving aspects, the healing aspects of it. Is that what you're saying?
Right, right, because they're lacking. They're lacking fulfillment in some manner, so they lash out because of
Hmm.
it. They might not be mindful of it, but he goes,
Hmm.
hell, if we teach them mindfulness, think of how much good we could do.
I know.
But yeah, it's they're just not fulfilled in that sense. Obviously, that's why they're on the dark end of the spectrum instead of the light end. So if we can fulfill them, then they're transformed. But
And
then,
they can help transform others on the outside.
right, right.
Uh,
It's a ripple effect.
when will we see major changes in the jail system?
Not in this life, he says.
Okay.
He said it'll get worse before it
What,
gets better.
what can we do to change the current prison? This gentleman asked. Write letters? If so, to whom? What? I mean, he wants to know what he can do and what we all can do to help.
He says write. You can write letters, contact like your commerce or your congressman or whatever, and volunteer,
Oh,
because I think there's like he's showing a small thread of energy in these people that they're very aware that the system is failing the inmates,
mm,
but they're like, well, nothing we can do about it. They
yeah,
don't put any energy into it.
yeah.
So if they actually find or come across someone that's willing to put energy into it, like, because what could you imagine motivational speakers going to jail? to talk? Could you imagine them having seminars for all of the inmates to sit down and listen to a motivational speaker? So those people being put in place would be huge for the inmates. You know, it's getting those people to do it.
Yeah, and
They're
starting before they
there.
get to jail, going out into the communities and giving, you know, creating programs, and they do have some, of course, that make these troubled kids feel loved and learn how to love themselves. So yeah, I guess what you're saying is the ideal justice system would be one that does not has no punitive aspects, but has the aspects of healing and love and remediation.
Yeah, because he's like think about it from a mother standpoint. And these are his words. He goes, when your kid fucks up and then they hurt themselves and they hurt others, what do? You go, oh, come here. Okay, I'm going to tell you why this is wrong, but I'm going to help you figure out a better way to do it next time. You never just, you know, scold them and throw them away, but that's what we're doing. We just like trash can them, he says.
Yeah.
So
Too bad.
it's very basic, he says. It's very simple and very basic, but we've become so religious to our rules in the system. Like it is like its own religion, he says.
Yeah.
And people are crazy about like, don't mess with it, don't mess with the system. It is what it is, leave it. So
it'll be a
breaking
while.
through those.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Erik. Thank you. We have to close now, and you guys check out Kim's website. She's got Sedona coming up. I think you have other places, other itineraries. Check it out, www.kimbabcock.net, and I will post it on this YouTube too. Thank you, Kim. Love you, and thank you, Erik. Love you.
It's like, I love you, Mom. He's doing his shoulder thing again.
What's with his shoulders? Bye, guys.
Bye.